My daughter called me at 7:15 that morning, the way she always did when she wanted something. 3 rings, then a hang-up, then calling again so I'd know it was urgent. I was already dressed. I'd been up since 5, the way I've been since Dolores passed. Sleep stopped making sense around the same time the house started feeling too big. "Dad, we're going to miss the shuttle," she said, and I could hear my son-in-law in the background telling her to relax. They had plenty of time. I drove them to Houston Hobby myself, loaded their bags into the trunk of my Silverado. 2 rolling suitcases and a carry-on, all of it newer than anything I'd ever owned. Luggage my daughter had charged to the credit card I co-signed for because her husband's credit score was, as she put it, a work in progress. I didn't say anything about that. I hadn't said anything about a lot of things for a long time. The drive down Telephone Road was quiet. My son-in-law sat in the front seat scrolling his phone. My daughter sat behind me looking out the window. We talked about the weather, about the Astros, about nothing. She leaned her head against the glass and said, "You'll be okay by yourself for a week, right, Dad? You've got Felix if anything comes up." I said I'd be fine. I said I always was. At the departures drop-off, I got out and helped them with the bags. My son-in-law clapped me on the shoulder. "Appreciate it, Harm," he said. He'd started calling me Harm 2 years into the marriage, and I'd never liked it, but I let it go. My daughter kissed my cheek. Her perfume was the same brand Dolores used to buy her for Christmas, and for 1/2 second it knocked the wind out of me. "Call me when you land in Cancun," I said. "Of course," she said. I watched them walk through the automatic doors and disappear into the terminal. Then I got back in the truck, pulled out onto Airport Boulevard, and merged onto the 45 North. I had a whole quiet week stretching out in front of me. I'd been thinking about fixing the fence on the east side of the property, maybe finally organizing Dolores's sewing room the way I'd been putting off for 4 years. Small things. Good things. I was somewhere around the South Loop when my phone buzzed in the cup holder. I glanced down at the screen. It was Felix. Felix had been my property manager for 11 years. He lived in the guest cottage at the edge of my land, a deal we'd worked out after he lost his apartment following a bad divorce. He watered the garden, watched the security cameras when I traveled, and never once texted me during the day unless something was wrong. He knew the difference between an annoyance and a crisis. That man had more common sense than anyone I'd ever hired. The message was 4 words. "Don't come home. Cameras." I put my turn signal on and pulled onto the shoulder of the freeway. A semi blew past me hard enough to rock the truck. I didn't wait. I opened the security app on my phone, the system I'd installed myself 3 years ago after a rash of property crimes in the neighborhood, and I tapped into the feed. The driveway camera showed a yellow cab parked sideways near the back gate. The kitchen camera showed nothing. I switched to the office. My daughter was standing behind my desk, pulling open the middle drawer. My son-in-law was on the other side of the room, sliding a framed photo aside to look at the wall behind it. He was looking for the safe. There was no safe there, but he didn't know that. He was guessing, and the fact that he was guessing told me he'd been watching me for a long time, cataloging my movements, my habits, the way a man studies a house he plans to enter. I stared at the screen in my truck on the shoulder of the 45, with 18-wheelers rattling the windows, and I felt something very still settle over me. I'd spent 40 years in commercial real estate. I started with a borrowed pickup and a surveying kit, driving out to scrub lots in Pasadena and Deer Park, looking for land that other people had written off. I built my company one parcel at a time. I learned to read people the way I read topographical maps, looking for where the water runs, where the ground shifts, where things aren't what they appear to be on the surface. I should have read this better. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to say one thing. I loved my daughter. I still do. That's the part nobody talks about when they tell these stories. Loving someone doesn't disappear when they hurt you. It just changes shape. It gets very heavy, and you carry it differently. My daughter is 34 years old. Her name is Leanne. She grew up in that house, did her homework at that desk, grew 4 inches one summer against the doorframe in the kitchen that still has the pencil marks. Dolores and I raised her the way we raised everything, carefully, with attention to the details, knowing that the small things were the ones that held the structure together. I don't know exactly when she changed. I know that my son-in-law Quentin had something to do with it. I know that the money did too, or whatever you want to call what he was doing, because a man who borrows $340,000 from a private lending group out of Dallas using forged guarantee letters isn't an investor. He's something worse. I watched on my phone screen as my daughter opened the shadow box on the corner of my desk, the one that held the last things Dolores ever touched. A half-finished grocery list in her handwriting, a birthday card she'd been making for my 65th birthday, which came 9 days after she passed. A ticket stub from the first baseball game we ever went to together, August 1987, the Houston Buffs against the Iowa Cubs, at the old Diamond off Cullen. Leanne knew what was in that box. She'd stood at the graveside when Dolores was buried. She'd held my hand. She picked up the birthday card. She read whatever her mother had managed to write inside it. Then she set it back down without expression and kept looking for what she'd actually come for. That was when I started the truck, but I didn't drive home. I drove to a diner off Maikawa Road that I'd been going to since 1994, a place with bad lighting and good coffee, and a waitress who always called me Han and refilled my cup without asking. I took the booth in the back, spread my phone on the table, and watched. My son-in-law found the filing cabinet in the hallway where I kept the property records. He started pulling folders, reading documents. His face was focused in a way I had never once seen during a holiday dinner or a birthday party, which told me something about where his real intelligence lived. My daughter came in to show him something on her phone. Their voices were low, so I turned up the audio on the camera app and pressed the phone to my ear. He said it's all held in the storage unit off Beltway 8, my son-in-law said. The original deeds, the cash reserve, everything. How do you know? Because I talked to his accountant 6 months ago. I told Kirk I was helping update the estate documents. He thought I was authorized. Kirk Rollins had worked with me for 15 years. He hadn't done anything wrong. He'd been used. And the cash, my daughter said. 200 and some thousand, sitting in a fireproof lockbox. He's been saving it for that foundation thing, the one named after your mother. My son-in-law paused. We just need the storage unit key and the combination. They're somewhere in the house. I called my attorney. His name is Clive Barwick, and I've known him since we were both younger men, back when he had hair and I had knees that didn't complain on cold mornings. Clive is not a dramatic man. He is the kind of man who speaks slowly because he knows that the most important word in any sentence is usually the last one. How bad? He asked when I'd explained it. They want the storage unit, the deeds, the cash reserve for the foundation. A pause. Harmon, the foundation assets are outside your personal estate. You know that. I know. They can't touch the trust. A power of attorney, even a legitimate one, wouldn't reach those funds. I know that too. I took a sip of coffee. But they don't. Another pause, then Clive said, "What do you want to do?" I looked out the diner window at the parking lot. A woman was loading groceries into a minivan, a toddler on her hip. Normal Tuesday. Normal life happening 3 feet from where I was sitting watching mine catch fire. I want them caught, I said, all the way caught, not scared off, not warned. I want every piece of it on record. Clive was quiet for a moment. Then let them get comfortable. I've never been an actor. I was a developer. I spent my life showing up in Carhartt pants and steel-toed boots, saying exactly what I meant. But I understood what Clive was telling me because I'd used the same logic in business more times than I could count. When you suspect a contractor is cutting corners, you don't announce the inspection. You walk the site like you're not paying attention. You let them get comfortable, and then you look where they're not looking. I paid for my coffee. I sat in the truck and I thought about Dolores. She had a saying she used when I'd get worked up over some deal that was going sideways. Harmon, she'd say, not unkindly, you catch more with patience than with noise. She was right about most things. She was right about that. I picked up a pair of reading glasses at the pharmacy 2 blocks down. 3 prescriptions too weak for my eyes, blurry enough that I'd have to squint and peer at everything, which would do nicely. Then I drove back out to the house. I didn't use the main gate. I parked on the back road and texted Felix, "I'm here. Back way. Don't say anything." He texted back one word, third. A third person had arrived while I was gone. I cut through the tree line on the south edge of the property, land I'd walked 10,000 times, and came up through the back door. The kitchen was quiet. I could hear voices from the hallway. I stood in the kitchen doorway, took a slow breath, and walked in. "Hello?" I called out. My voice came out thin, uncertain, the voice of a man who wasn't quite sure where he was. "Is someone there?" "Who left the back door open?" The voices stopped. My daughter appeared in the hallway. Her face went through three things in about 2 seconds. Shock, then fear, then something that rearranged itself into concern. I recognized that last expression. I'd been watching my son-in-law wear it for 3 years. "Dad, what are you doing back? We thought, your groceries, the list you left." "Groceries?" I looked around with deliberate blankness. Did I make a list? Dolores usually makes the list. She flinched, one small involuntary flinch, and then it was gone. "Right," she said carefully. "Right, Dad. Come sit down." My son-in-law appeared behind her. Behind him was a man I recognized from a Chamber of Commerce luncheon 3 years back. A buyer's agent who worked the line between legitimate real estate and whatever lived just past it. He had the kind of smile that arrived before he did. "Who is this?" I said, pointing. "A friend," my son-in-law said, watching me with the attention of someone recalculating. Dolores didn't mention company. I rubbed my eyes. I've been having trouble keeping track of things lately. Did she call ahead? My daughter's eyes moved to my son-in-law. Something passed between them. The kind of look that means they'd been planning one version of this situation, and I'd just handed them a better one. "It's okay, Dad," she said, softer now. "Why don't you sit in your chair? I'll make you some tea." In the living room, I sat in my recliner by the window, the chair where I'd watched the Astros win the 2017 World Series, where I'd read to Dolores during her last months. And I listened. They were in the kitchen. The stranger's voice was low. "He seems pretty far gone. You sure about this?" My son-in-law. His doctor told Leanne there's early-stage cognitive decline. He has good days and bad days. Today's clearly a bad one. There was no doctor. There was no diagnosis. My cardiologist told me 8 months ago I had the resting heart rate of a man 15 years younger. But my son-in-law had spent a year building a story about me, and that story needed me to be fading, and so I was fading. My daughter brought tea. She sat across from me and talked to me gently, the way you talk to someone you've already half let go of. And I understood, sitting there, that she had already grieved me, decided I was gone, filed me away somewhere, that made what she was doing easier to live with. You can take things from a ghost without feeling too bad about it. "Dad," she said after a while, "there's some paperwork Quentin and I have been meaning to help you with. For your estate, just to make sure everything is organized." She laid a folder on the coffee table. I could see the header from where I sat. Durable power of attorney. "This looks complicated," I said. "It's simple. You just sign at the bottom." I looked at her. I looked at my daughter. Really looked at her. The way you look at something you built and loved and watched go wrong. She had Dolores's eyes, that deep brown that looked like good soil. Dolores would have been 63 this October. She would have made a peach pie. She would have told me to let it go, and I would have tried, and I probably wouldn't have succeeded, and she would have laughed at me about it in the specific way she had. We had 31 years of that. I signed the paper, but I didn't sign my name. I drew a slow, trembling scrawl across the line, the kind of mark that looks like surrender, but is legally nothing, because the name was illegible, and the woman my son-in-law had arranged to notarize it. The next morning was not a licensed notary in the state of Texas, which Clive had already confirmed by 9 o'clock that evening. Let them have the paper. Paper without foundation is wallpaper. While my daughter was managing me in the living room, Felix had gone into the office, under the pretense of checking the cable connection, and plugged in an external drive I'd texted him to retrieve from my truck. My son-in-law's laptop was open on the desk. He'd been logged in since that morning. Felix, who had spent 6 years doing IT support before he ended up managing my properties, copied 11 months of emails, a shared cloud folder, and a spreadsheet that turned out to be a detailed accounting of funds my son-in-law had borrowed against my name. 3 forged guarantee letters, totaling $340,000. All bearing a signature that looked almost exactly like mine, but wasn't. The following afternoon, when the locksmith my son-in-law had arranged arrived at the storage facility off Beltway 8, he drilled the combination lock on a fireproof box that had cost me $300 at a Costco in 2019. They'd gotten the combination from a note my daughter found tucked in my desk, which I had placed there deliberately, 2 days before I'd driven them to the airport. It read 8/12/63, which was Dolores's birthday. The obvious choice. The sentimental old man's choice. The lockbox opened. Inside was Dolores's recipe card collection, 300 index cards in her handwriting, her mother's recipe for peach preserves sitting right on top. There was a manila envelope containing the ticket stubs from every Astros game Dolores and I had attended together, which turned out to be 206 games over 31 years. I'd counted them one night when I couldn't sleep. And there was a single index card I'd written myself and placed on top of everything else. It said, "The money's been moved. The deeds are in the foundation, and I've known about the letters since February." According to Felix, who watched through the storage facility's own security camera, my son-in-law's face went a color that has no good name in English. Clive arrived at 4 o'clock on a Thursday with 2 investigators from the Texas Attorney General's Financial Crimes Division. The lending group's Dallas attorney had already been in contact, cooperating with investigators to limit their own secondary liability once the forged documents had been traced. My son-in-law was arrested in the driveway. He didn't fight it. He sat down on the hood of his own car, and somehow that was sadder than if he'd run. My daughter stood on the porch. When the investigator explained the structure of the Dolores Briggs Legacy Foundation, that the commercial properties, the cash reserves, all of it had been transferred 2 years ago, that Leanne was listed as a beneficiary for a $2,500 monthly distribution, and that the trust contained a clause which revoked beneficiary status in the event of fraud or criminal conspiracy against the trustee. She sat down on the porch steps and put her face in her hands. "She can't sell the property," Clive said to her, not unkindly. "She can't transfer the deeds. None of it is your father's personal property. None of it has been his personal property since the week after your mother's funeral." My daughter looked up at me then, and for the first time in what I realized had been a very long time, she looked at me the way she used to when she was small, like she was trying to figure out what she'd done wrong and whether I was going to forgive her. "I knew," I said quietly. She blinked. "What?" "I hired an investigator in February. The letters. The lending group. Quentin telling my accountant he had authority he didn't have. I reached into my jacket and set a folded report on the porch railing next to her. I knew for 3 months. "Then why didn't you?" "Because at Christmas, when you called and said you wanted us to be closer, I thought you meant it." I stopped. "I was ready to help you, Leanne. If you'd told me the truth, I would have found a way. I always did." She started to cry. Real tears this time. I know the difference. I'd spent 34 years learning that face. "I'm sorry, Dad." "I know you are," I said, "but sorry is the beginning. It's not the end." They took my son-in-law downtown. My daughter would face separate charges, though her cooperation in documenting the broader scheme worked in her favor. Her attorney told me later that she wouldn't serve time, but would spend several years under supervision and owing restitution that would take even longer to clear. She wouldn't be comfortable, but she would be alive and she would have a chance, which is more than she'd left me in her plans. Felix and I sat on the porch after everyone left. He'd found a couple of Shiner box in the back of the refrigerator and handed me one without asking. We sat there for a while, not saying much, listening to the tree frogs starting up in the yard the way they do when the temperature drops. "She really didn't know about the trust," he finally said. "I never told her," I said. "I never told anyone except Clive. Dolores was the one who wanted it structured that way." I looked out at the yard. The oak tree we'd planted the year Leanne was born had gotten enormous, shaded the whole south side of the property now. She said, "Harmon, if there's nothing to grab, nobody grabs." She was smarter than both of us. She was smarter than most people I'd ever known. I sold the Silverado that fall and bought a smaller truck. Nothing special, just reliable, the kind I drove when I was starting out. I've been taking drives I don't have a reason for lately. There's a county road east of Alvin that runs through the rice fields, and early in the morning, before the heat comes up, it's about the quietest stretch of nothing you've ever seen in your life. A man can think out there. Or not think. Both are good. I take that road on Tuesdays now. I think about my daughter sometimes. I think I probably always will. But I've stopped thinking about it the way I used to, like a wound I was responsible for closing. Some things belong to the person who made them. A man spends his life building things. He learns which materials hold and which ones fail under pressure. He learns that the most important part of any structure isn't the height or the appearance. It's whether the thing stands when the ground moves. The Dolores Briggs Legacy Foundation is funding 2 environmental science scholarships at the University of Houston this fall. Dolores used to clip articles about wetland restoration and leave them on my desk without saying anything, just leaving them there for me to find, which was her way of telling me what mattered. There's a community garden breaking ground on the east side of the city, in the neighborhood where I grew up and where nobody had a yard worth mentioning. Her name is on a small sign near the entrance. My daughter tried to steal a house. What she didn't know was that the house had already been given away, already turned into something that couldn't be stolen, because it already belonged to something larger than either of us. That's the thing about building something real. It doesn't disappear when you stop watching it. It just keeps standing. I pulled onto the county road one morning last October, with the windows down and the radio on. Merle Haggard, which was Dolores's preference, not mine, but it had become mine somewhere along the way things do when you spend 31 years with someone. The rice fields were silver in the early light. A great blue heron was standing in the shallow water off the shoulder, like it owned the whole county, which I suppose it did. I didn't check the rearview mirror. I had plenty of road ahead.